Hi, everyone. On behalf of Ardent Partners, I'd like to welcome you all to our webinar on Accounts Payable 2020, Big Trends and Predictions. My name is Matt York, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. I am a senior research analyst here at Ardent Partners and the editor of our daily media site, cporising.com, where I write about procure-to-pay and emerging business technologies like AI, blockchain, and Industry 4.0. Before we begin, let me take care of a little bit of housekeeping. To start, everyone listening in will receive a copy of today's presentation. We have a highly interactive event planned for you all today, and we welcome your participation. So please submit any questions that you may have via the Q&A tab on the control panel, and we will try to work them into the Q&A part at the end of the webinar. We've got a lot of great content and discussion ahead of us today, so if we don't get to your question, don't worry. We'll follow up with you after the webinar, and we'll get you some answers. In the meantime, to view the webinar in full screen mode, click View menu and select Full Screen. If you experience technical issues during the event, you can call GoToWebinar Support at 1-805-617-7000 and provide the event ID 322-777-299, and or you can send me a message and I'll try to assist you. So like I said, we've got an exciting webinar planned for you today. We're going to present our big trends and predictions for AP in 2020, and we've got a number of them for you. Then we'll dive into a lively roundtable discussion between Ardent's founder and Chief Research Officer, Andrew Bartolini, and representatives from the sponsor of today's webinar, Tradeshift. Then we'll wrap up and take some questions from attendees. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Ardent Partners. We're celebrating our 10th year in operation, and you can see a bunch of highlights from the last decade. But high level, we're a research and advisory firm focused on defining and advancing the supply management strategies, processes, and technologies that drive business value and accelerate organizational transformation within the enterprise. Ardent Partners actively covers the supply management marketplace and produces research to help business decision makers understand, first, industry best practices and how to improve performance, and second, the technology landscape and how to identify the best fit solution or solutions for their specific budget and requirements. Now, let me tell you about CPR Rising, our daily media site. It is the first independent site designed exclusively for chief procurement officers. If you like today's webinar, and we believe you will, we encourage you to visit cporising.com for more insights, best practices, procurement and tech news, and thought leadership discussions. The site frequently features content from Ardent's premier analyst team with a focus across all areas of the supply management spectrum. The sister site to CPR Rising, Payable's Place, is a news and research site also published by Ardent Partners. Our goal at Payable's Place is to be the leading provider of information, research, analysis, and best practices around AP and P2P technologies. We engage AP and P2P leaders as well as the technology providers in the space with a steady stream of top quality, progressive, and original content. That includes relevant news, insights into specific tech providers, AP research, and thought leadership. Check us out at payablesplace.ardentpartners.com. Ardent's monthly webinar series is an easy way for procurement, finance, and supply chain professionals to keep up on the latest trends in procurement and supply management. Every webinar is designed to deliver research, insights, and crisp, actionable recommendations from Ardent's analysts and other procurement experts. The 2020 calendar will include a series of great topics delivered during this last full week of each month. So we encourage you to visit www.cporising.com/webinars, where you can get more details and where you can register. And we'd like to thank our sponsor today, Tradeshift, for making this webinar possible. Tradeshift drives supply chain innovation for the digitally connected economy. As the leader in supply chain payments and marketplaces, the company helps buyers and suppliers digitize all their trade transactions, collaborate on every process, and connect with any supply chain app. More than 1.5 million companies across 190 countries trust Tradeshift to process over $500 billion in transaction value, making it the largest global business network for buying and selling. Discover commerce for all at tradeshift.com. Now let's meet today's speakers. First up, we've got Mike Judd. Mike is the Senior Director of Product Marketing at Tradeshift. He has a long history with procurement and financial solutions and working with customers on best practices. Prior to Tradeshift, Mike was the Product Director at procurement startup Vruzy, where he was responsible for the roadmap for mobile procurement, marketplace, and AP automation solutions. Prior to Vruzy, Mike was a procurement solution manager at SAP for 15 years, where he engaged companies, big and small, to shape SAP's procurement portfolio and roadmap. Mike is building on that experience to deliver solutions that enable process improvement, organizational alignment, and innovation and continuous growth. Mike, thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Matt.
Next up, we've got Andy Moore, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Tradeshift. Andy has worked with e-invoice compliance solutions for large international integration companies, including IBM, OpenText, and Axway, as well as in international procurement companies. Additionally, Andy has extensive experience working in the banking and transportation industries. Andy, thanks also for joining us.
Great, thanks for having me.
Finally, we've got Andrew Bartolini, the founder and chief research officer here at ArdentPartners, and a globally recognized expert in sourcing, procurement, and supply management overall. Andrew is an analyst who has spent the past 2 decades helping enterprises develop and execute strategies to achieve best-in-class performance within their procurement and finance departments. So I'd like to welcome Andrew, who will now take it from here. Andrew, the floor is yours.
Hey, thank you, Matt. Hello and good day to everybody. Really excited to talk about the big trends and predictions that we have for the accounts payable market and profession in the upcoming year. A couple of years ago, we started to look at the procurement space and have done a webinar similar to this, and actually have one coming up in January with the procurement theme, but felt it was probably a couple years later than we would have expected, but we're really excited today to share with you a number of big trends and predictions, and also to bring Mike and Andy into the conversation. Right, we can leverage their expertise, in the AP space and at Tradeshift. So, without further ado, right, we're going to cover a fair amount of ground pretty rapidly, but big trend number one. We've been over the past decade analyzing the AP space in great detail, multiple surveys, thousands of companies surveyed, benchmarked, and interviewed over that time period. One of the things that we've tracked and used as a proxy to really understand the maturation of the AP market is the level of electronic versus paper or manual invoices that are being transacted in the marketplace. And across the spectrum and across the 20 years that I've been in the space and the last 15 doing extensive research, we hit a pretty significant milestone, and a milestone that was a long time in coming. And that milestone is what you see here, and that is that for the first time in our research and in the market, we actually are seeing a majority of invoices processed electronically. Now, we've had multiple conversations, and we've done some webinars with Tradeshift in the past, and the challenges to get to this point have been significant, but the hurdles are getting shorter for organizations, and we see some real momentum as we start to look at the opportunities in the space. And prediction number one, sort of part and parcel with the larger trend, is that we really do expect to see e-invoicing growth accelerate in 2020. There's a couple of reasons for this, right? I think that what we have seen on the adoption side is that organizations are new organizations are adopting the solutions and deploying them in a faster at a faster pace than they would have, even 5 years ago. And there's a lot of factors for that, but cloud delivery, better pre-built integrations, supplier enablement, and sort of the use of web-based networks and sort of strategies that can push forward, I think are, I wouldn't necessarily say that this is a prediction that says that there's a tipping point and that we rapidly move to, 90% electronic. But it would be pretty surprising if over the 2020s we don't get to that point. Now I'm going to pull Mike into the conversation here, right? You've seen the growth, and maybe share the perspective that it's been a little bit slower than you might have expected, but we're also seeing some real momentum here. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, no, I think we have. I think that more people recognizing the power of digital, and we'll talk about that in a minute, and really what it can do for your processes in business. So I think there is it's exciting to see the growth that we've had, but certainly there's a open opportunity that we also want to talk about for the next decade, of course.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great, right? So we see new user adoption picking up in the 2020s. We also think that it's time for those of you that have systems, programs in place to go back and revisit and really push for that second wave, right? The first pass has been, significant and has moved the needle, but opportunities to move it forward, exist. Now, big trend, number two, I guess, didn't necessarily label number the trends, but what we've seen over the past couple of years is, while the word transformation, so if I go back to my start in the industry, about 20 years ago, so many of the projects that I worked on were process automation projects. They may have used the word transformation, but essentially they were really looking to, take the current state processes and then map them exactly to the system and drive some efficiencies. And, by and large on the AP side, some efficiencies were gained. But, I think that, there's been a change in the mindset. I think in part that's been driven by the level of innovation that we see in the solutions today. And, people are coming into this with a different mindset, right? We were talking with Mike and Andy yesterday, and Mike was saying, we've moved beyond the point of making the horse go faster, right? I mean, what we're doing now is let's get into a new model car and really start to accelerate. Let's really start to rethink what it is. Let's start to rethink how technology plays in the traditional, pyramid of people, process, and technology. And I think that, it's really an exciting time to be working within the enterprise and within AP because of these newer and expanded opportunities. I think that the role of technology certainly has
Actually,
started.
Andrew, I'm sorry. Do you mind if I go back one? I really love this slide. I love this slide.
Oh, sure.
And it has a lot of thoughts that we want to pick up later in the roundtable. So I just want to plant a few seeds now while we're looking at this slide. So, we often ask people, when do you think you'll be done with digital transformation? And most people say never, right? It's constantly evolving, and it seems to be a moving target. So therefore, we see people wanting to focus more on digital transformation on the outcomes. They always talk about delivering faster and better to customers and the superior economics of it and innovation, to name a few things. And you're absolutely right. We see that right-hand side. And when you think about process focused, it's about making that horse go faster. So you're absolutely right. This is back in the day when if you asked people what they wanted, they said they wanted a faster horse. But guess what came along with the automobile, right? And so now people don't miss that opportunity, like not seeing the automobile. We want to open up the mindset to what can be possible now in a digital world. So digital, and that seems to be the high-level objective for many I've seen and that we talk to. They recognize or they want to see that when that opportunity presents itself to create an automobile, they want to be able to do it. They want to be innovative. So they want to make sure that they're able to respond and see that opportunity when it presents itself. And you're absolutely right. We've seen the power of digital in our personal lives. We get rides to the airport. The car shows up at our doorstep. We know when we're going to arrive at the airport. We get custom food orders delivered to our doors as well. So we're very powerful in our personal lives, but not so much at work, right? So why do we get calls from suppliers all the time asking, hey, when are we going to get paid, right? But we know exactly when we're going to get a ride to the airport based on when that car arrives at my door and the traffic to the airport, right? So that's the kind of digital power that we now want to try and get to in our work world. So, as we go through today and into the roundtable discussion, think about how we can arm those people there with the digital experience that we all know. One that's connected, so it means we're connected in real time. It's convenient because we can move the physical world from the palm of our hand. That's great power. And it's in context. I don't get all the garbage. I'm engaged at the right moment at the right time for that particular context, right? That's what digital is all about. So think about that as we go through today. The second point to note is that the people side of it on the left-hand side, that's huge. It could be internal and external. And I know Andy's going to pick up on a few things there with internal and external and how that we do engage those. But these are people like our requisitioners, our buyers, our suppliers, managers, AP departments, treasury, tax consultants, logistics expert. Those people can be a number of people now. So think about that as we go through today. And now imagine that supplier who's now armed with digital won't be calling you anymore. That supplier will know exactly when you know when they're going to get paid. And just the last thing to think about before we move on, I just want to caution today about digital is not the same as electronic. If we scan an invoice, people say, yeah, I'm electronic, right? But what happens once that invoice changes, right? We need to maybe rescan it. We might have to even look to see if we already paid it, right? What digital is all about is real-time information. As events change, people who need to know about it. So just like that car coming to my house to take me to the airport, I'll know if that driver's going to be late, and I'll know if I still can make it to the airport on time. That's the kind of power I have today. So again, just my last thought. So again, think about digital as we go through today and about those people there being connected. It's convenient for them and they're put into the right context at the right time. So thanks, Andrew. I just want to make sure I put those points in.
No, absolutely, Mike. I mean, I'll just sort of, breeze through this one right here. I mean, the role of technology clearly has changed, right, from process enabler to the process. And what has really helped make that happen is that the mindset really has changed, in part because the technologies have gotten much more sophisticated, much more robust, right? You're looking at, no longer, again, sort of mapping what you're doing today, in a, what's often a fragmented and not uniform fashion, onto a system. What organizations now have the opportunity to do is really rethink or reimagine what it is that they're doing, modify their processes, change their culture, and leverage technology as a focal point and a driver behind that. It used to be that, the introduction of technology and change management was, we're going to it'll be imperceptible what the change is going to be because we're going to do everything exactly the same way. And that mindset, much more broadly and beyond AP, beyond procurement, beyond supply management across the enterprise, has really started to change. And I know, Andy, you've got some great thoughts here on the concept as well.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. That's something we see a lot of, right? Is companies coming in and taking a look from moving from sort of basic sequential processes, which have inherent bottlenecks and challenges to them, and rather than rethink sort of the how do we do it today, it's really how could we do it, and really be better and able to handle compliance and various company-specific processes that, frankly, aren't really handled very well in traditional accounting or procurement software. Great example is seeing companies doing the network where they process includes not only their own stakeholders, but now you can start to plug in various experts. So the idea that Mike talked about earlier of, hey, how come we're so good as consumers, but at work we're not great? It's really taking that and moving it up to the corporate level where you can add in apps, where you can arm companies with a digital experience for specific functionalities such as risk, compliance, variety of other things that fall outside of their traditional software specs. We see a lot of companies really adding variety of apps to really extend and enhance their interactions to better fit the business model that they have, in order to drive both innovation and creativity. So it's companies really moving, and Mike really made a great point, is not thinking about it as, hey, I'm going to take this process and make it electronic. It's how do I take this process, rethink it completely, and then make it digital.
Yeah, no, I mean that's fantastic, and I think, right, so all of this excitement, right, sort of at the front end of this webinar, I think you can sort of hear that coming through. At the same time, right, I mean, digital transformation is not necessarily this, you're all in all the time, right? You can start with, one step and begin, much as you would, in years past, right? If your budget doesn't allow for something that's comprehensive in scope, right? It's sort of taking those first steps forward, right? Maybe starting on the inbound side, maybe starting on the payment side, but thinking more comprehensively and thinking more holistically about the end state, right? Mike mentioned, right, sort of a focus on outcomes and a focus on results. And so, digital transformation really, sort of part and parcel with a shift that leads us to, our second prediction, and that is, as we move away from trying to make the horse go faster, sort of the core or baseline functionality in invoice automation and in payment automation, becomes less important, right? They become table stakes. And, what we start to see now, particularly, right, if you think about the concept of digital the way that Mike was talking about it, right, sort of real-time access to information, enables AP to become a strategic hub. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But, as a strategic hub and as an intelligence hub, the information that gets processed can be vital and important and valuable to other parts of the organization, including procurement, including treasury, and including your suppliers, right? I mean, let's not forget that they're a key constituency, and one of the main stakeholders in a successful AP or P2P deployment. A big trend, right? So AP becomes more data driven. I'd say that there's absolutely no doubt about this, right? We have seen AP evolve in the 10 years at Ardent and maybe back even a little bit further, evolve from a siloed back office, transactionally focused, largely manual function to an organization now that is getting ahead of the curve, is starting to, make its own case. It doesn't need necessarily to partner with other business functions, right? People understand, within the organization, or I should say that there's a greater understanding today within the enterprise that the work that AP is doing is valuable, and that the information that AP is processing has strategic value to the rest of the organization. So whether that's in the supplier performance management area or risk management, certainly around the compliance side of things, and you can look at that as price compliance, you can look at that as process compliance and SLA compliance. There's a lot of great information. The first step, sort of indicated here, is and the research that we're showing is based on the market research we've done over the past couple of years, and typically a couple hundred AP and finance professionals. AP realizes that, and with that realization can begin to really push the ball forward. Other big trends, right? So we have asked over the past couple of years, what are the elements or what are the things that, if introduced to your organization, would put it on, sort of the next level of performance? What would change the arc of the performance trajectory significantly higher? And it's no surprise here that, again, it's data and intelligence. Now, several years ago, the answer would have been, for AP to become more strategic, or the top business pressure is for us to process invoices faster, for us to become more efficient, for us to start to have some visibility into the process. And as we've talked about, right? I mean, there's this sort of more expansive and strategic mindset that's taken hold within AP over the past couple of years, and it manifests itself in any number of ways, right? It's sort of the concept of a true transformation, and that transformation being holistic and really across the entirety of the AP operation. It's a mindset that says, yes, efficiencies are important, and we may still need to make our business case based upon that, but there's another level of value. And as organizations start to look at, sort of expanding those opportunities and utilizing systems to do so, we see, that data and intelligence are really going to become a big part of the AP story as we move into the next decade, right? So, big prediction number 3, right? I've sort of already given it away, right? So AP drives forward in the age of intelligence. We're in a data-driven society. We're in a data-driven world. We have seen fundamental changes within other parts of the organization in how they operate, in how they focus, in how they think about what it is that they're doing. And those changes have been based upon the data and the data analysis and the data science that's been applied to that. We've seen entire industries utilize data to change the basic mechanics of how things work, right? If you were to look at something like online marketing, the algorithms there and how ads are placed, is no longer an art. It is, full-on science. And we expect at AP, as they become more automated, as they begin to introduce systems that enhance and augment what it is that they're doing today, as they begin to leverage data that is coming through their organizations, as they begin to leverage data from other parts of the organization, they're going to create this fantastic intelligence dividend. And so, what does that mean, right? So I think there's multiple components to what that actually means, but what we're expecting to see is that modern AP teams are going to prioritize data management, right? They're going to provide the intelligence that stakeholders within the enterprise and partners outside the enterprise can use to become smarter, to make better, more informed decisions. And it starts with the data that AP is transacting, but as you start to look at some of the big opportunities that we see, it's pulling in third-party data, right? It's joining networks, and by joining the network, making the network smarter with your own inputs, but extracting value and extracting intelligence as well from the larger data set. When you put AP into that context, right, it's an entirely different discussion than the one we were having in 2009, and one that we expect to continue to accelerate as we move forward. One of the drivers of AP becoming more strategic and AP's ability to become an intelligence hub is the series of solutions and technologies that you see here that have been commercialized over the past couple of years and are now being built into and embedded within your core e-payables or AP automation solutions. Back, not, maybe even just 5 years ago, if you were looking for, sort of a more advanced functionality, what would happen? What frequently happen is that, you'd have to go and find that third-party capability and paperclip or staple it to your e-payables or AP automation solution. I mean, that is fundamentally changing, and it's not just within AP, right? Which is why we're very confident and excited about this, right? We have seen these solutions take hold in other parts of the organization. Now, it brings us to prediction number 5, and so all that said, artificial intelligence. We're going to see its adoption increase, but our prediction is that 2020 is not the year for the full breakthrough, and part of that is that there's a lot of confusion, sometimes intentionally designed and sometimes unintentional, but what true AI is versus other capabilities like machine learning and RPA, probably doesn't make sense to delve into the details of that. We are on the cusp of AI and some significant breakthroughs. I guess in the AP and in the P2P arenas, but we don't think that 2020 is necessarily the year where that happens. And it's not that the capabilities that are sometimes described as AI aren't going to continue to emerge and advance, but it's probably a technical nuance that probably doesn't warrant much more description here. But where we do get excited, and prediction number 6 is that many of the other solutions that we see are really going to start to make a breakthrough in 2020, and have really already started to. We expect to see natural language processing and RPA being used to drive to at some level what the APN game is, at least on the inbound side, and that's touchless process automation, right? We have seen the best-in-class organizations have really been successful in getting a majority of their invoices processed without any human intervention or interaction. We think that those solutions combined are going to be powerful in continuing to push the industry forward. And now blockchain. You could argue that blockchain is also a new advanced technology that has had significant hype. when it comes to blockchain, we see some very specific use cases, as it relates to supply chain tracing and contracts and B2B payments that, are very practical applications of the technology. We're going to start to see, more solution providers, invest in these areas, all three of these areas, and we expect to see 2020, these things start to emerge in a more meaningful way. Now, back to the big trends, right? So, I think it's fair to say we're living in pretty strange days, and that would be wherever you sit on the political spectrum, right? I don't think that there's any doubt that there's been an increase in political and economic uncertainty in the U.S. and around the globe as well, and that has increased over the last 12 or 18 months, right? I think that there's any number of examples here. The move towards free trade, we've been on sort of a long continuing sort of path towards more global free trade. That appears to, that path is now, less clear. But on the political side, right, a fair amount of uncertainty, Brexit, the Ukraine, what's happening in Chile, and the U.S. elections, right? All are just, point examples of sort of the larger geopolitical and economic uncertainty that we see, in the U.S. and around the world today. Now, it's our view and my view, I guess, most specifically, that this uncertainty has a very strong potential to negatively impact our economy and all economies. And at some level, the longest U.S. expansion, and it's been the longest in history, that can't go on forever, right? I mean, I'm years away from my economics degree, but we're more likely to see a down cycle sooner rather than later. It's not something that I would prefer per se, but it is a prediction. And to be fair, it was a prediction I made at the beginning of the year. I feel more confident that the economy is going to start to fade, more so in 2020. Now, the converse of that is that there's good news associated with this for those working in the P2P world. If you go back to the Great Recession, 2008 into 2009 and 2010, what that did for the investment community was significant, and thankfully markets have bounced back. What that did for executive leadership at businesses around the world was have them quickly refocus their energies and efforts. And a lot of what happened in 2008, 2009, and 2010, what organizations started to focus was really on what was happening in the world of P2P and within procurement. When you can't control the top line and sales and market growth, organizations quickly go to a focus on the bottom line. And back then, cash was king. And what happened as a result is that helped align what procurement and AP were working on with the larger strategic initiatives of an organization. I've talked about the importance of strategic B2B payments and supply chain finance. When cash and liquidity become superlative and above all else, the amount of cash that's paid out to suppliers quickly comes into focus. 10 years ago, there weren't necessarily solutions that allowed you to nimbly and quickly manage that, right? I mean, part of the cash management opportunity, for organizations is largely linked to the relationship that organizations have with their suppliers, right? And as we continue to see supplier enablement numbers increase, by significant steps each year, the opportunities for strategies to be deployed, and instead of the old sort of first in first out, an invoice has been processed, let's pay it, with the visibility and the real-time intelligence that's coming from systems today, AP can partner with, or at least provide the information to Treasury, so that they can think about what it is that they're doing and put in greater controls and have a greater impact. And sort of part and parcel with that is that, it's our prediction that B2B payments will become a strategic business process in 2020. And to be fair, much in the same way that I, predicted a recession for this year was a little off. I have previously made the prediction that B2B payments will become a strategic business process. Maybe the timing is a little bit off with this one, but 2020, this is front and center. When we engage with AP organizations to talk about what it is that they're doing from a system standpoint and from a talent management standpoint, payments is no longer an afterthought. Payments is front and center in the view. And when you look at the entirety of the AP operations, the greatest leverage points, the greatest opportunity to impact the bottom line of your organizations is on the payment side. And so, I'm very confident that B2B payments will become a strategic business process. And so, that's sort of a quick drive-by and breeze through the big trends and predictions for AP in 2020. And, for the next part of today's webinar, we thought it would be a great idea. They introduced themselves a little bit earlier with some great thoughts and ideas, but wanted to bring our two AP experts back into the conversation, Mike and Andy, to have them comment and explore and expand upon, some of the ideas that I've just presented for you. And so, here are the 9 big AP 2020 predictions, and don't necessarily have time to go through all of these, but let's go back and revisit number 1. All right, and so e-invoicing growth is going to accelerate in 2020. All right, and we feel very confident about that one. Also feel very excited about that. So Mike, as you think about that, right, and you jumped in a little bit earlier, right? It's not all straightforward, right? There are some blockers to this. Talk a little bit about some of those hurdles, how companies are surpassing those, and then, why is it more important in 2020 to go digital than at any other time?
Yeah, no, great question, and thank you. And thank you for putting all the predictions and trends together. You've given us a lot to talk about. I know we've kind of honed in on a couple of these. There's definitely a lot to talk about, but it also makes the next 10 years exciting for us as well, as we kind of enter the next decade. So thank you for all that. So yeah, this is where I started my comments today. So you asked about the blockers and the urgency, and let me start with the urgency. So this goes back to my favorite slide. If you remember, this is the one where I chimed in with the people in front of the process. So it's about those people being more connected, right? So digital is about being connected. So we said they're connected, it's convenient, and it's all done in context. And that's really what the power of digital is. And it looks like companies are now recognizing that power, that digital power, for its speed, for its accuracy, for the visibility that you're getting, certainly the reach. So it's a huge source for advantage. And it will be a huge source for advantage, and to some degree it already is. So if you adopt it faster and quicker, then you now have an opportunity to gain at your competitors' expense. So we've seen more and more of that in the last few years, right? Those are more digital, displacing those that are more traditional and long-standing even. So you don't have to be big anymore. You just need to act big, and that's what digital lets companies do. So really the focus, and for many of the reasons you even just said before, Andrew, that we need to do certainly better with the economics even. We've heard that we need to do more with less, right? So so that's the power of digital. And I agree with you, Andrew, that digital doesn't have to be big bang. It can start by breaking down some of the barriers, fixing the problems that we have today. You can certainly do that by introducing digital processes and then arming those people, as we mentioned in that slide, with the capabilities to be digital. So some early wins that we've seen from digital, just starting digital and getting a quick start, you can certainly go a long way to reduce those supplier phone calls, the support costs. When am I getting paid? I mentioned that example. You can get faster invoicing processing times. You could reduce the number of errors that come in and all the manual tasks that have to do with those errors. And then take advantage of early payments. We'll talk more about that. That certainly goes under the cash is king category, but you can see more and more opportunities now with the more efficiencies and the visibility, taking advantage of things like early payment. And then once you get these quick wins, then you could build on that digital foundation. You can build more automated processes and engage suppliers at a more strategic level. So once you get the basic communication taken care of, the conversation moves to a more strategic level. You have stakeholders there that are interested in your business and your success. Certainly will help you innovate from a product perspective, but also even from a process perspective. So you're now engaged with those experts, if you will, or your explorers. So these are the benefits of a more connected supplier relationship. So that's where I kind of see the urgency coming from, getting to that state. But you also asked me about the blockers. So some of the blockers have been supplier adoption, for one. And even in your report, Andrew, and the ArdentPartners report says suppliers don't have the capabilities to work with you digitally. So it's been largely about convenience for the supplier, right? It's more convenient for them to send the paper. And now digital and networks change that. So like we talked about in our personal lives, what's more convenient, right? Is it text or is it sending a mail? I can't remember the last time I sent anything by mail, right? And we know that answer, right? So we know the power of digital there. But it really just has not been convenient for sellers up until now. So digital and networks have the opportunity to make the engagement more convenient for both sides and adds value to both sides. So like I said before, we'll talk about early payment again, but think about if a supplier can get paid in 2 days, then that's value to that supplier. That's going to drive participation and adoption. They're going to be willing to participate with you now to get to that opportunity. So that's how we start to reduce those blockers. It starts with that digital convenience and that power that we talked about, and then value for both sides.
Right. And value for both sides is key. And, I think it's important to note, right, that one of the things that makes, AP automation and, we use the term e-payables and P2P solutions unique is that, for there to be success, for you to get the ROI, it's required that a third party gets engaged and gets engaged quickly. Now, second prediction here, right? So AP teams will shift priorities for AP automation, right? So moving beyond the baseline, really looking for enhanced and larger opportunities. Now, Andy, Mike, you both have customers that have, moved beyond basic invoice process functionality. I'm not sure who wants to start here, but maybe talk about what you're seeing with your customers and in the market.
Well, I'm excited to jump in again, so I'll go. And actually, you made a great point here earlier that I documented. You made the point end-to-end automation is one of those things that goes beyond. It's part of the AP automation, or goes a little bit beyond that. So let's get to that point. But we think AP is in a great position to network the company's suppliers on the digital network. So all spend goes through AP, of course, and all suppliers want to get paid. So that's a great recipe to have a digital network and get that participation, right? So AP is in a great place to start it. So what I thought I'd share with you is a company that started simply by reducing the phone calls, right? So they looked at kind of fixing what's broken, and then got to that state of end-to-end, or is actually getting to that state of end-to-end automation that you mentioned. So they started with reducing the phone calls. So they got 5,000 suppliers on board in about 10 days, and then started to watch the calls drop because they had that digital connection. They could get the same information that the company was getting. All right, so that's what they had access to. So the calls were dropping. And then it evolved into phase one, where they connected 19,000 suppliers across 22 organizations. And this is across about 100 countries. And then for those organizations, those 22 organizations, the calls dropped to 0. In fact, if anybody did call, they would say, go log in because you're going to get the same information that we have. Stop calling. So they're able to drop the calls. And then, obviously this digital thing they really like. So the next phase, they introduced a partner solution that enabled them to do supplier collaboration for direct material suppliers. So now they're bringing on the direct material suppliers to the network, right? And then now, once they had this big network of all their suppliers across the globe, they were able to start introducing early payments in 2 regions of the world, in Southeast Asia and Europe. It's also interesting too for this particular company. The IT department also was able to add value. Andy's going to talk about apps in just a second, but what the IT department was even able to do is create an app of their own, because nobody's going to create this app. There's no market for it. So they created an app where sellers or suppliers could agree to their responsible sourcing terms. Okay, so before any orders could be sent in, they had to agree. It's a pretty simple app, but it was very important for them to do that. So now they have this global digital network. Everybody's bringing in apps and suppliers to this network. Now procurement's looking at this and saying, wait a minute, what can we do with a digital network with all our suppliers? So that's where we're starting to see now the evolution of full digital procure to pay process right there. Started with AP, solving some simple problems, expanded on a number of platforms, not only in terms of number of sellers, but also the number of processes they could introduce to that network. And you can see now a full-blown digital procure to pay process. So also with a full digital P2P process, they're building the data intelligence they need as well. So think about how spend analysis could change on a network. So all the things that we talked about with digital speed, scale, reach, accuracy, all those things that we talked about for digital now have the potential to give you real-time spend analytics. So it's no longer a process where I don't feel too confident, even after cleansing the data for a month or so, I don't feel confident. But if you have real-time data that's enriched in real time and in context, then that's the kind of thing that you can achieve with your data. So this is what AP can deliver to the company on all these different fronts. Andy, I think you also had some comments too, so I'll let you talk.
Yeah, no problem. No, I think those are all fantastic points. And the way I sort of look at this is part of what Mike's describing there is really building out smarter systems. So it's really you now have the ability to cover industry, category, regional, and company specific processes by adding various apps, which is really a great way to engage various expertise for specific functionality, whether that's an external app or even as Mike described, it's somebody building their own app internally to do something that's very specific to the company. The way I think of this is a la carte apps, just like you have on your smartphone, right? You pick and choose which apps you need. I go out to the app store. There's a ton of apps that I would never need or use. I go out and pick and choose the ones I use, and those are the ones that end up on my phone and my devices. And those are the ones I use. So the idea there being now that companies can really do the same thing, because where you've been limited in the past by, okay, I bought this solution and I can maybe plug a couple of solutions together. Now you can really think about what digital process am I trying to build out, and then what do I put together as sort of apps, and sometimes we think of them as Lego blocks. How do you put those together to build out to really best support the process and the digital transformation that you're looking for? That's it for me.
Yeah, no, I think that's great, and I think that the discussion that both of you have given right here, just talking about this one prediction, really, is sort of a, an interesting sort of timeline, and maybe as a reflection of where AP has been this past decade, right? I mean, Mike started by talking about, well, hey, let's get organizations to start reducing the number of inbound phone calls, and our research shows that still today in 2019. 22% of the average AP staffer's time is spent responding to supplier inquiries, right? And so, that's a non-value added task, right? And then at the other end of that spectrum, right, Andy's talking about, how organizations now are starting to take these advanced apps and sort of layering them into their own business process and getting them, sort of into the fabric of how they operate and bringing third-party expertise in an elegant way. And it really is sort of the paradox of where AP is, but we're definitely trending in the right direction. I'm very excited about that. One of the things that gets me very excited is that AP is finally started to focus in on its data, right? Again, I mentioned earlier that organizations are for many years the focus was, all right, we got to reduce costs and time to process an invoice, and really nothing else matters. The focus now on data, the focus on becoming more intelligent, really is a leading indicator of the direction of where AP is, and the opportunity to become an intelligence hub has multiple facets to it. One of those is around taking third-party data and incorporating that in a real-time way into decision-making and planning. Andy, you just were talking about apps, but let's talk about this third-party data. Are you seeing organizations doing that today, and if so, what are they doing?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. We're really seeing this move towards network data and being able to access the data from various applications in various ways, and like you said, in more of a real-time environment. Like a great example for us is have customers who are using ArdentPartners to detect various things such as slavery, if they're trying to make sure that what they're building out in their products doesn't have any slavery issues, or to do the what is the credit risk and exposure based on the various people they're transacting with. those are great things where you can just add those in to your process, as I mentioned, in real time. So if you look at these companies have global networks and teams of data. You can go to these app partners and really have that expertise around credit risk. Companies internally don't really have that ability to go, what is the credit risk for every one of my trading partners, and what is my slavery risk based on the different components I'm putting into my product. Having those app partners who have that expertise just makes that so much easier when you can plug that into your process. And what we're really seeing there too is companies are being pushed harder and harder, especially over the next decade, to be more agile and insert solutions much faster based on the business changes that are going on. That access to expertise and expertise data is really going to become bigger and bigger. And how do you plug that in quickly and efficiently to be able to get the business results you're looking for? And that's where we're seeing a lot of companies really take a look at their processes and say, these are some standalone processes. They work pretty well. That's something we can just sort of leave as is. But when we're looking at digital transformation, here's some processes and some parts of our business where we really want to change and rethink how we do that and make that a real digital transformation. And that's where having those apps and that expertise in the marketplace can really come into play to be able to do that very quickly.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. I mean, I often think about the largest opportunities that exist for, AP and procurement and really across the full source to settle process. And, we think that it's the big data opportunity. And I know that there are some of you that are listening in and part of, these are predictions, not recommendations. Make the one recommendation here that, when AP really does start to become much more intelligent in leveraging data, when some AP organizations are starting to do that, right, there's going to be a competitive advantage that's going to be seen. And for those of you that aren't equipped today to take advantage of that, or have the staff ready to even if you had the data and the intelligence to convert that into value, now's the time to start to begin to build the foundation, on the system side, begin to build the foundation on the staffing side as well. And so, again, I spoke about, many of the big opportunities here, have and continue to think for a very long period of time, right? We, in fact, developed the ePayables, the ArdentPartners ePayables framework 10 years ago, with sort of a holistic view of what happens in the entirety of AP operations being important. And B2B payments have now come clearly into focus. And what the opportunity is for AP is large and significant. One of those is getting AP and Treasury much more aligned. And so, Mike, I think you agree as well. How do you see that starting to take hold?
Yeah. I mean, it's great that we did the Intelligence Hub right before this too, and skipped to this because, to me, intelligence means the people and the data, right? That you had that slide that I really love with the people in it, networked, and armed with digital now to make things happen and get the visibility and speed that we talked about. And then you and Andrew and Andy both talked about how the processes could be composed with, the people being more creative, and you have the different people now that can engage as experts. So I think you see two experts really emerge, particularly when you think of cash as king in number 8, and then B2B payments becoming a strategic process, maybe go hand in hand. So two people that could really work together now are AP and Treasury. And as I mentioned before, I was going to bring up early payments again. And in cash, if we want to ensure liquidity and manage cash, and we want to think again about that shared value, both on the buyer side and seller side, then there's some great opportunities for AP, Treasury, and the suppliers at the same time. So we see AP can now create opportunities for Treasury on one front to use their cash better and get better returns. And some of some of the dynamic discounting models, that could be one way to use cash and get some better returns on cash. Or there's the potential now to leverage a financial institution in the network. And this is going to get suppliers the cash they need, but you still are able to pay per term, and maintain your DPO goals, your days payables outstanding. But in this particular case, because the supplier got paid early, you're not hurting that supplier relationship. So you probably know that as supply chain financing. Now, what's interesting now, if you kind of caught what I said, you can leverage a financial institution on the network, where back in the day when banks were building their buildings, they would actually place those banks in the physical marketplace. So they would build it where there was a market, right? Because they want to participate in that market. So now we're seeing them putting themselves in the digital market and creating the for financing opportunities in the digital market. So there's more participation and access to the capital that's needed. And this is an interesting statistic by Ardent that today companies are only taking advantage of early payments 19% of the time. Okay, that's pretty low. There's a big opportunity there, right? But they're only taking advantage of that 19% of the time. And we think one of the reasons is because simply there's missed opportunities, right? In a connected world, when you have suppliers now connected, suppliers now have the ability to say, hey, I could use that cash now. So this time of year, this example really hits me hard because I'm spending a lot of money on the holidays, right? So I need cash now. So sellers run into certain situations where they need cash, right? So, but meanwhile, there's a payment term that was negotiated 2 years ago on a contract that they have to fulfill. So how do we then enable a seller who's at this particular time and moment could use the cash? And that you could do that through the network participation. So events happen to your sellers, but they're really going to appreciate the opportunities to get the cash when it's needed. So that's one way, right? You're now connected to sellers, and that's going to increase the 19% of the time that we see today. The second side of it is now that we can process invoices faster, that means greater returns. So we know that, let's take a 90-day term. If we process an invoice in a day and a supplier has to wait 89 days, they're willing to pay a little bit more for that cash, give you a bigger discount, right? Whereas take it to the extreme, this is not going to happen, of course, but you take 89 days to process an invoice, they're going to say, well, I get paid tomorrow. I'm not giving you anything, right? So those two fronts right there are acting together to create that value, higher returns and more participation. So we've actually seen now AP departments really creating this value for the organization. And that's one way they're becoming strategic just right off the bat, right off that digital network. And I think you had something too on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think in summary, I think you had all the key points. It's really about how you have all those stakeholders networked into a process and really kind of taking it away from just sort of AP focused and really thinking about, hey, if you're really effectively managing your working capital, then when you have your buying decisions reflect the best ways to optimize working capital. So all things being equal, requisitioners can select a supplier that would result in opportunities for better returns on cash, for instance, for a dynamic discounting program. But at the end of the day, it's really about network finance should really be about the success of the entire community, where you have procurement, AP, and treasury, plus the suppliers, financial institutions, and partners all as part of an ecosystem, as opposed to 5 or 10 different processes all running distinctly different and sometimes interacting. It's really how do you pull all those together to be one successful program.
Yeah, no, that's great. And so I sort of look at the these 9 predictions and sort of said well, what's the culmination, right? And I think clearly if you've paid attention at all, right, we believe at Ardent and I expect at Tradeshift that AP is going to become more strategic in 2020, and the speed in which it does so is going to accelerate. Now, pose this last question to each of you here. So what does that mean? I mean, what's the manifestation of AP becoming more strategic next year? What are we going to see in the market?
Yeah, for me, we obviously talked a lot about digital transformation, and for me, it's really that intelligence hub that AP is in a great position to create for the company. So you create the seller network or the digital network, and then you could really build on top of that. And that was really the example that I gave, the consumer products example. So AP is in a great position to deliver that network, deliver a platform too, right? We talked about when Andy spoke of all the opportunities to bring the experts in and get different people, not just the traditional buyer and seller, but there's a lot more people that can engage the process. And once you build that, then you really become strategic and you can start to automate. And this is where, when you start to automate, then you get to that more creative level, right? Where you're working with suppliers on a more strategic level, and we talked about where they can not only engage you in product innovation, but also even process innovation. They're true stakeholders for you as well. So this, I mean, all this, putting this all together, starting with a digital base and growing from there is really going to make AP the champion, and really lead you to more exception-free processing. And we know Ardent Partners calls exceptions the root of all evil. So you're going to go a great way to reduce those exceptions.
Andy?
Sorry.
Andy, any thoughts?
Yep. No, sorry about that.
No worries.
And really, I think you're spot on. It's really about how the finance, treasury, and procurement all align to improve cross-functional data, which can really improve information for all three groups versus very siloed approaches of, hey, we're all operating distinctly and sometimes we have to work together. And it's all about real-time spend analysis and data information, and then really improving then working capital management. And all of those things work much better when all three of those departments are working interactively on a shared database or shared data and information.
Yeah, no, that's great. So I think we're in absolute agreement that 2020 is gonna be the an exciting and very interesting time to be working in AP. I'd like to start by thanking Mike and Andy for joining us, and of course Tradeshift for sponsoring today's event. I think you guys' insights were spot on, and sort of very aligned with how Ardent Partners thinks about this market. A few other points, right? So those of you listening in, please watch for our CPO Rising survey, which will be launching next week, and then invite you to join us at the end of January for our next webinar in the series. That topic's going to be Procurement 2020, Big Trends and Predictions. And so on behalf of everyone at Ardent Partners, we want to extend our best wishes for happy holidays and for a safe and happy new year. So thank you all, and back at this soon.
Andrew, Matt, thank you. I'm looking forward to seeing the electronic versus manual stats next year. So
there you go.
Yeah,
all right, thanks guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks.